Good morning and welcome to this morning's presentation on smart factory integration. This panel is going to look at who's already using Industry 4.0 practices, what quality and yield improvements they've made, and what they've learned from the process. To discuss this, I'm joined today by Michael Ford from Aegis Software. To his right, we have Richard Vereijssen from Yamaha. To my immediate left, we have Alexander Hagenfeldt from ASM, Assembly Systems, and on the end we have Robert Huber from Mentor, a Siemens company. Okay, welcome, gentlemen. So I'm going to get started straight away with my very first question, which is really, there seems to be a definite apathy among manufacturers towards implementing a smart factory strategy. What are the reasons behind this? Now, Michael, you were at a conference we held last week out in Silicon Valley. We had a lot of high-end people there in terms of tier one manufacturers, high-end OEMs, defense companies, Google, etc. But very little of the mid-range and smaller companies. What's the roadblock?
There are a few different things. First of all, a lot of companies in the industry have been burned in the past by facing the difficulties of getting information of value from different processors, machines, and whatever else around the factory. And the way to resolve this is to spend a lot of money, historically. So, you know, in the pre-standards era, people were having to make bespoke interfaces and invest heavily in doing that. So, before people can really make a large investment, they need to understand what is going to be the return. And I think we'll find that under the surface now, there are a lot of companies who are dipping their toes into the water and doing some pretty amazing things. But this is not seeing the headlines yet. The ones we saw, the examples that we saw, where, you know, AI, for example, for purchasing of components. Yeah, that's, I mean, it's interesting, it's great, but then you realize what it's doing and you're thinking, well, that's adding to the problem rather than, you know, solving the problem in terms of, you know, component shortages.
Right.
You know, they're looking out for number one rather than, you know, thinking about the industry as a whole. So we've got to be a little bit careful.
Yeah.
So I think we need a lot more experience. We need to understand what we do with the data that we collect, how it's used to enhance what we're doing first, and make sure that it's cost effective. So a lot of questions to be answered before we make that final leap.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Richard, I mean, I think manufacturers generally tend to be fairly risk averse. They usually wait till their customers ask them to do something before they actually start implementing it. But in the smart factory debate, is that not going to be too late? Do they not really need to get started now?
Yeah, correct. We see a lot of customers waiting for actually guidance from us as manufacturer. Yeah. Mid-size range customers don't have the organization to working on improvements on, these days everybody is very busy with keep up the production running, and those improvement steps, they are looking for guidance. And in this perspective, we as manufacturers are now able to offer the next step for their factory efficiency.
Right, right. Okay, that makes sense. So if I can turn to you for a minute, Alexander, I mean, how much help does ASM have to give customers that are embarking on this journey? You know, do you have to hold their hands quite a bit through it?
Well, it really depends. We definitely want to work closely together with our customers, and we consider ourselves to be a partner for them. It doesn't matter what size they are. We want to be there and support them, set up the processes that they need to take this next step into a smarter manufacturing. And we have a lot of offerings that can help them in many different areas. So I think with our portfolio, we have a very good spread to really cover and reach most of the areas that are available in the factory today. And for that, we then have tailored solutions to our customers' needs.
Right. Okay. But you know, if they have a specific issue with a yield problem or something like that, you go in and you actually tackle that issue and give them a solution.
Definitely. So we actually have 5 centers of competence. We refer to them as spread out across the world, which is a place where our customers can reach out to ASM and ask for assistance with regards to specific processes related to SMT production.
Yeah.
And our experts will help our customers work out a solution that will work for this particular product.
Right, okay. Robert, if you go into most manufacturing companies today, you see a lot of homegrown systems. A lot of companies look at that as their IP, their big differentiator. I mean, 'cause everybody's got a printer that's pretty decent, everybody's got a pick and place machine that's relatively decent. The software is a differentiator. So how much of that is a barrier to wanting to then go down a more standardized route with Industry 4.0?
Well, I think when we talk about, let's say, large companies, especially top EMS companies, they have large IT groups inside the company. They feel this is a competitive edge. When you go a little bit to smaller, they don't have the scale to compete. They definitely need partners. But even in the large ones, they are actually understanding in the meantime a lot that from a point solution, they may be able to compete. From a holistic point of view, then they're really struggling. Because it's not just taking data from one machine and maybe do a closed loop to the next one. Yes, that's a point solution and it's helpful.
Yeah.
But when you really want to understand, you have to bring back all the real-time data from the shop floor to the design of the process, to the design of the product, and so on. And that the engineering tools, they're normally never designed themselves.
Right.
Monitoring tools, traceability, yes. But once you bring it together, they need partners as well.
Yeah.
And that's really a change that I see very often. But every company is different. Some are faster in realizing it and coming to us. Some still say, well, we only take this piece, the rest we do ourselves. And we are open. We don't want to force customers. We are here to help.
Right, yeah. No, it's very true. I mean, they have to take a more holistic approach. I mean, you know, they're going to get so much, maybe 2 or 3% extra yield on their line, but, you know, most companies there's 50% downtime in a factory, and so they need to take a more holistic approach to try and get all of the savings involved there. Coming back to you, Michael, a company starting out on this journey, what is the first steps that they should be looking at taking?
I think the first thing is to have a look at what problem they want to solve. You know, what is their business focus? Do they need additional flexibility? Do they need to deliver to the customer on time in a better way? Do they need to have more conformance? So whatever they're going to do within their new digital factory, they need to have that business outcome, because somebody's got to pay for it. You know, it's not just something we do as engineers because it's great and it's fun. Yeah. We actually need that business process. So you look for the business goals, and then you create a strategy working back from that. Mm-hmm. So it does not start with the technology.
Right.
So technology is for people like us to have a look at, to think about, and be ready to provide customers with the solutions based on standards, based on availability of information. And then we also work out the ways of turning that information into value. But how do we know what value to create? It's got to come from the customer. So all of our kind of experience for the many years that we've been doing this, we kind of know what's going to happen. But with Industry 4.0, the whole world has been turned upside down, because the kind of software that we made 5-10 years ago doesn't really cut it anymore. Mm-hmm. You've got to have something more modern, something that's made for IoT, something that addresses the new needs of the customer in the true digital factory. Yeah. So again, we're back to learning to an extent, and we need to start to put together the solutions that we believe the customers are going to want based on their business needs. Right. That's the secret for the success.
Richard, you look at it from the equipment side. So do you look at it for, as Michael says, from what issues are they having and attack these first, or do you go in and what is your approach to it?
Yeah, we see that a lot of customers are hesitated to make a next step and thinking that it's only possible with a new line purchase, mm-hmm. But also with the existing lines and existing factory environments, there's a lot to optimize. And we see a lot of requests from customers where we can do some process evaluation and giving already tools and improvements in the current situation. Mm-hmm. And that needs to be much more clear to customers, to that it's not only in new investments, but also in existing environments, there's a lot to gain with new software, new functionalities to make that next step in creating a smart factory.
Well, there is a lot to gain, but you know, the truth is, none of you guys are really giving us numbers yet. You need to tell us, you know, if we implement this system, if we implement a Yamaha system, you're going to increase your yield by X and apply it to your product, or you know, you need to give people hard numbers so that they can actually do the value.
Yes. Yeah,
Calculation.
we value the investment to customers if we finding out what is the current situation and where they can go to.
Right.
So, but definitely there are factories where we can increase 20 to 30% yield with an old existing line.
Right. Wow.
So there are big steps to make with existing lines and even much more in with the new equipment.
Right. 20 to 30%, that's huge. That's huge. Okay. You're in a similar position, Alexander, you know, when you go into a company. One other thing I would add to that is there tends to be regional differences as well. I mean, like, for example, in China, it's fairly common to replace the whole line because you're only as efficient as the slowest machine on your line. Over here, they replace them in onesies and twosies. So what is the ASM approach?
Right, so the production environment is very different in Asia, or tends to be different in Asia, and I think what you refer to right now is your typical high volume line, and normally what's associated with that is that you have one product that is running on one line, dedicated, maybe it's the top and bottom side, and there's a whole set of different challenges when you're trying to optimize that process as opposed to what we're used to here in Europe, which tends to be more flexible production, and we're trying to reach batch size 1, large family setups, and so on. So we need to come up with solutions that can cater to both these worlds. And I believe the placement machines are, so the equipment that we are manufacturing is definitely able of doing that. But then there's a whole set of processes. How are we going to run this equipment? So even though it's the same machine in both environments, it can be used in different ways. And there we have a lot of supporting products that will help our customers get the most out of the equipment that we put in their factories.
Okay, good, thanks. So, Robert, you're obviously in the same basis as Michael with software, except with the Mentor Siemens, you go a bit further down, up and down the food chain with the, you really start a lot at design and PCB. How much of that, what is your approach when you're talking to a customer about integrating a smart factory solution?
Well, we always come from the big approach because we really believe in it. You have to start from the design of the product to the design of the process. You have to monitor the actual process and feed it back because you have to do the learning because the virtual product, the virtual process is based on data. You may have made some wrong assumptions, so you need to learn and fine-tune it. The other piece that our story is also always is you cannot just look from an electrical point of view, just SMT. We have also the whole mechanical piece. What happens very often today is, okay, we change, let's say, a connector from a different source. The pins are the same, but the holes are slightly different. And in box build area, all of a sudden it doesn't fit into the case anymore. So you need the communication between the design systems, from the ECAD to the MCAD system, backwards, from the process and so on. So you need to analyze, especially when you go towards lot size 1. You know how many variations of products you build. You have to make sure before you bring it to manufacturing that this actually fits. You cannot try, okay, let's produce and figure out how we actually mount it at the end of the day. Other pieces that you have, of course, issues is when you have lot size 1, how much time do you have to ramp up to quality? You have one boat. You cannot do 1,000s and then let's fine tune or whatever. The first boat has to have quality. And we strongly believe that all has to be based on the virtual twin of the product and the process up front. So that's our big story, and this is where we put a lot of energy into it to make the story really complete.
Right. Yeah, you're right. I mean, the digital twin is obviously the way forward because that's going to eventually get the closed loop that we want. And so the designer is actually learning from the process as well, and we're having fewer turns before a product goes into production. You know, typically today, every product has about 5 or 6 turns before it actually gets into production. You know, what's your view on that, on the digital twin situation? I mean, I think that's fairly critical.
It's absolutely mandatory these days. I don't think we can tolerate having humans in the process anymore, you know. In the past, for example, bringing a product from design into production, it would take, what, 8 working days or 2 weeks or something like that.
Yeah.
And, you know, that fixes the line that you're targeting that product for. So you've got no choice anymore about, you know, adjusting production to suit the customer need. When you're able to use a digital twin, like, for example, I mean, IPC 2581 is available for everybody to use, you can take a product digitally from design into manufacturing in, you know, in minutes.
Yeah.
You then have the luxury of being able to say, okay, my customer today wants, you know, 1,000 per day. I'm going to run it on the 1,000 per day line from a leading machine vendor. Oh, but the next day, maybe they want 800. Now, I don't want to run that on my 1,000 line because that's 20% productivity gone right there before you did anything. So you've got to be able to move that onto a different line configuration. The digital twin enables you to do that because you've got the digital product model there, and you can convert it to a digital process model in a matter of a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
That is for Industry 4.0 because it gives you that flexibility. That's how it works, and that's what it's for.
Yeah.
So all of these terms that we hear, all the jargon that goes on, that's the actual business result that you get.
Right, yeah. Yeah, and I think it's very exciting. I mean, as I say, we've been working for years to try and close this design for manufacturing loop. And here's a way we're actually going to achieve it, which is quite exciting.
Yeah, and it goes further than that because when you've got the digital twin coming in, you're then collecting information from the shop floor using, for example, CFX from IPC. You are then starting to get a picture of actual manufacturing. So then when you do your DFM for your next product, instead of using sort of rules that somebody came up with because they thought some academic rule worked, now you can look at actual production and put the data into context with what really happens.
Right.
And then it's a whole new generation of DFM cycles.
Right.
So this is really going to add huge value to quality and throughput in manufacturing.
No, I agree. It can also be quite frightening, I guess, Richard. I mean, how disruptive is, you know, implementing a smart factory strategy into a factory?
Yeah, I think it's all depending on the customer how to implement this next step, how they organize it with the people they have, and how to organizing the complete implementation.
Right.
But in principle, everybody makes those steps when they're implementing things and see that they are improving and making a better production environment.
Right.
So that's, I think, not so.
Yeah. Okay. Great. The other area, of course, Alexander, big potential saving area is in machine downtime. You know, you go into most factories, most machines have been sitting idle up to 50% of the time or more. So what is ASM doing to help with the logistics of moving product around the factory or getting material to the line on time?
Right, so focusing more on uptime then of the line and how to keep it running, right? So again, we have different software solutions that will help our customers run their factories more efficiently. I believe one of the key topics that we need to focus on is the material flow in your factory and having the transparency of knowing where the material is at any given point in time. So without having such a material management system in place, it's very difficult to make sure and maintain a high uptime on your line. Right. In addition to that, Michael touched on it before, it's all about making sure that you're running the right product on the right line, so utilizing the equipment in the best possible way. And even in this type of scenario, we have software that will help you decide where to run which product based on the components that you want to place. Right. So we obviously know in our programming software which components from which manufacturer and so on need to be placed. Based on that information, we can make these decisions and also come up with a production plan essentially for the production floor, how and in which sequence you should run these products.
So more intelligent use of the line and the different lines within the factory.
Right, so this is then also merging with the whole material management software. So we know what material is available, we know what products we have to produce, and we know which line is the most suitable, also based on things like when does the product have to be done. Right. And all that is now finally coming together into a solution that we can offer to our customers.
Okay, okay. Are you involved in factory logistics much, Robert?
Yes, we are.
Yeah. I mean, there's actually reports coming out about cobots saying that rather than losing jobs on the factory floor, they're actually creating jobs because these cobots have to be looked after, they have to be maintained, etc. What's your view on it?
There is some truth to it. I mean, there's different kind of skills that you need, but it will also replace people.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have some AGVs running around bringing material, you don't need people doing this anymore. Of course, you're placing these people, but you will have to need people to maintain them, to repair them, or whatever is needed to get them running, very clearly.
Okay. Okay, great. All right, well, we're just about out of time, so I'm going to finish. I'm going to give Michael the last word here because I want to very quickly fit in something about CFX. And I know you've been heavily involved in the CFX standard. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about what's happening here at SMT Nuremberg. I believe there's a number of companies that are hooked up to the CFX system, similar to the system that was at Apex, and it can be viewed online. Can you maybe tell us a bit about that?
Sure. Anybody can go right now to www.connectedfactoryexchange.com and you can see the information coming out of 52 different machines from a variety of different vendors here at the show, and it's all streaming live to that website. So when we spoke last, it was only a couple of weeks ago, I said that we're working with 200 different companies in the industry to create this standard. I was wrong. It's 320 now. It's like going up every time I speak to the guys at IPC. It's incredible success now that we're able to stream so much data. And we have now projects coming along where they're starting to use the data, for example, having a triple closed loop on one line where they improve the yield by an order of magnitude in terms of quality. It's amazing to see some of the results of the technologies that this is being applied to. So yeah, the pace is really picking up, and the great thing about CFX is, I mean, we're supporting it as a company, but now 320 others. It is free and available to anybody. If it was any less cost, I'd have to pay people to use it, you know? It's like the real, I mean, I've been in the industry for too long now, making so many different machine interfaces, and we're all on this panel facing the same problems. It's about time we saw the solution, and the solution is really here now.
Excellent. No, I totally agree with you. I think standardization is really helping to move this forward. And it's the same with the Hermes standard. I think that's been widely adopted too. So I think between the two, it's really helping to move the smart factory integration forward. We've run out of time. I want to thank my panel, Michael Ford from Aegis, Richard Vergessen from Yamaha, Alexander Hagenfeldt from ASM Assembly Systems, and Robert Huber from Mentor, a Siemens company. And I want to thank you for joining us. Thank you.